distinguished participants. I was very pleasantly surprised today because this is the first seminar in a long time. It started before its time, 5 minutes before my period. Today we are going to discuss biological weapons, and with your permission I will say a few words in that. I would first like to thank Ambassador Ali Sarwar Naqvi, Executive Director of the Center for International Strategic Studies, for inviting me to speak at this national seminar on the implementation challenges faced by the Biological Convention. In the pantheon of disarmament debates, agreements, and treaties, in the context of weapons of mass destruction, namely nuclear, radiological, chemical, and biological weapons, the biological weapons perhaps receive the least coverage and public attention, except for a few movies that Ali Sarwar Naqvi mentioned. Nuclear weapons and the measures to control their proliferation have held salience in the collective consciousness of the international community. Nuclear safety and security have also been discussed and measures adopted at the summit level because of the destructive power of these weapons. This has not happened in the case of biological weapons. It is therefore entirely appropriate that today we are going to discuss the treaty as well as the challenges that it is facing in its implementation. What constitutes biological warfare? In very simple terms, it means the release of viruses, bacteria or other germs, fungi and toxins to sicken or kill people, livestock or crops of the enemy. Biological weapons include a variety of germs, including anthrax, smallpox, Ebola virus, even Zika virus, and others. And because of the new genetic mutation and biotechnology developments, new biological weapons may be added to the arsenal of those who maintain them in a clandestine manner. Biological and chemical weapons also overlap at times, since toxins produced by some living organisms are considered as falling under the ambit of both categories of weapons. These weapons have been used against enemies since times immemorial. According to some sources, very crude versions of such weapons were first used sometime between 1500 to 1200 BC. In more recent times, there are many recorded instances of the use of biological weapons to bring an enemy to its knees. For example, in 1155, Barbarossa is said to have poisoned water wells with human dead bodies in a town in Italy. Mongols used to use catapults to throw bodies of plague victims inside the walls of the defenders' forts. The Spaniards mixed the blood of leprosy patients with wine to sell to the French soldiers somewhere in Italy. Polish forces fired saliva of rabid dogs at their enemies. The French and the Germans agreed not to use these weapons against each other in 1675. The British were not immune from using biological weapons. They distributed blankets from smallpox patients to the Native Americans when they arrived in the United States. And Confederates in the American Civil War sold clothing from yellow fever and smallpox patient to Union soldiers. In order to avoid these happenings, declarations were made in 1874 and in Brussels and 1899 at The Hague, prohibiting the use of poisonous weapons. Germany used biological weapons, anthrax and blenders in the First World War on a limited scale and not too successful. And as Ambassador Ali Sarwar noted, Japan used biological weapons both in Korea and in China. In June 1935, the League of Nations adopted a protocol for the prohibition of the use in war of asphyxiating, poisonous or other gases, and of bacteriological methods of warfare. This was a protocol to the Convention for the Supervision of the International Trade in Arms and Ammunition and in Implements of War, signed on the same date. The protocol entered into force in 1928. It was designed to prohibit use of chemical as well as biological weapons during armed conflicts between nations. However, the protocol was silent on production, storage, or transfer of biological weapons. Elements which were later covered in the Biological Weapons Convention and also in the Chemical Weapons Convention of 1993. The Convention on the Prohibition of the Development, Production and Stockpiling of Bacteriological Weapons and Toxin Weapons opened for signature in April 1972 and came into force in March 1975. The Convention is designed to prevent the development, production or stockpiling of agents, toxins, weapons, equipment, and means of delivery, except for prophylactic, protective, or other peaceful purposes. Pakistan signed the convention on the day that it opened for signature in three capitals, Moscow, London, and Washington, and ratified it in 1974. It came into force in 1975. To date, about 16 countries have either been suspected or accused at one time or another of having biological weapons inventories, most of them despite being parties to the convention. They include all 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council: Canada, Germany, Israel, and Japan. Cuba, Iran, Iraq, Libya, North Korea, South Africa, and Syria have also been suspected at one time or the other to have held biological weapons. The Biological Weapons Treaty provided for the prohibition of production and stockpiling of weapons, but did not provide for international inspections or verifications of stocks. It relied merely on national declarations and national means of detection. In the review conferences of the Biological Convention, which are held every 5 years, efforts were made to develop a protocol for verification and compliance. These efforts began in 1991 with the establishment of a group of experts which over a period of 4 years prepared a number of recommendations for this purpose. The work of this group was passed on to an ad hoc group which also met from 1995 to 2001 and eventually developed a draft protocol for state declarations, on-site visits to declared sites, and challenge inspections of suspected sites and activities. The United States rejected the draft, as well as any further protocol negotiations, citing national security and commercial interests. It argued that if a legally binding additional protocol to strengthen verification processes were to be adopted, too much transparency and intrusive challenge inspection of facilities could give rise to espionage against its pharmaceutical industry and threaten its national security. Since the adoption of the treaty, 8 review conferences have been held and at 5-yearly intervals, and the 9th review conference is expected to be held in 2021. The last review conference was a fiasco since it could not even adopt a program of work for meetings of experts and other activities for the years leading up to 2021. Nor was any additional funding forthcoming to strengthen the Secretariat support staff. A joint proposal made by China and Pakistan titled Non-Proliferation Export Controls and International Cooperation and an International Cooperation Regime went a begging. Similarly, proposals for a mechanism to review denials of export licenses were opposed by Western countries. Nor was there any agreement on effective detection, surveillance, and response to natural, accidental, or deliberate outbreaks of diseases. The discussions on the issue of transfer of biotechnology were also sterile. This dismal outcome should be worrisome for countries like Pakistan because it shows a singular lack of will and vision on the part of the Western world to promote international cooperation in this vital area. Let's talk about some problems that the Convention has faced in terms of its implementation. Some writers have stated that one of the problems is that the membership to the Convention is not universal. There are, however, a total of 181 state parties. 10 states did not sign the treaty, that is Chad, Comoros, Djibouti, Eritrea, Israel, Kiribati, Micronesia, Namibia, South Sudan, and Tuvalu. Some signed but did not ratify the convention. However, this is not a very strong argument since the non-member states do not carry much international weight except perhaps for Israel in this area. The basic weakness of the convention lies in the absence of international monitoring and inspections and verification mechanisms. Complaints can be referred to the UN Security Council, but this method has rarely been resorted to. It's only the Security Council which can authorize an investigation into these complaints. And Security Council Resolution 1540, about which we will be talking about later also imposes binding obligations on all states to prevent the proliferation of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons and their delivery systems. And since this is a binding resolution under Chapter 7, it can evoke sanctions against countries which do not abide by their commitments. Thirdly, no arrangements are in place for coordination among states parties with the United Nations or even with the WHO in case of a biological attack. And some countries, like India, for example, which is a nuclear power, have also in their nuclear doctrine stated that if they are attacked with biological weapons by another state, even if it's a non-nuclear state, they will respond with nuclear weapons. The fourth issue is institutional. Although there is a provision for the annual meetings of the state parties and review conferences every 5 years, there is really no secretariat or support structure to monitor developments or coordinate with member states like the OPCW or the Chemical Weapons Convention. There is only a 3-member group called the Implementation Support Unit as a part of the UN Department of Disarmament in Geneva. And the fifth issue is that it's highly unlikely that any verification measures, including challenge inspections, can be adopted in the face of staunch opposition by the United States. The right-wing, nationalistic jingoism of the present leadership in the United States will continue to ensure that such proposals get short shrift. What are the new threats that are facing the world in terms of biological weapons? These include threat of acquisition of biological weapons by non-state actors and terrorist attacks with biological weapons. Threats to poorly secured facilities holding potentially dangerous agents, toxins, or viruses. Rapid advances in biotechnology which could develop bacteriological weapons which are immune from any response. Lack of disease outbreak preparedness and response. Bacteriological weapons also can be quickly multiplied in small labs and pharmaceutical factories, thus making it possible for non-state actors to manufacture such weapons. What needs to be done about this? In my view, sufficient and sustained funding and payment of arrears by states parties and the expansion and strengthening of the ISU is extremely necessary. There must be a strong international leadership to reaffirm the importance of the treaty, and there must be a vision to link the Biological Weapons Convention as a part of a larger interconnected global security structure. The Biological Weapons Treaty needs to be reinvigorated and its importance reaffirmed, both in terms of non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and as a global health security issue by preventing, detecting, and responding to infectious diseases, whether natural, deliberate, or accidental. I thank you.